What up? What up, everyone? On this beautiful Thursday, I am Ron,
I'm Angela.
and this is
Chatter
Chatter
of
of
Opinion.
Opinion. Today, we are talking co parenting. In today's age, especially with COVID and individuals not being able to get along with each other, there's a lot of split families. Even before COVID hit, there was a lot of families that were separated, and which forces you to have to co-parent, which might not be the most pleasant thing to do,
No.
especially when parents don't get along with each other. So the question of today is, when we talk about co-parenting, whose responsibility is it, or is it your responsibility to let the other parent know exactly what's going on with the child when it comes to communication, no matter who has the child? If both parents have the same access to the information, right? Now, in today's society, when I did some research, there's two major things that really upset or confuse a co parenting relationship. One is discipline differences, when individuals um, pretty much argue or disagree about how you would discipline a child when in your care. And the other one would be communication, which is unclear or inconsistent communication. In this case, we're talking about communication when you have access to all the information, but you decide, or you don't decide
Right.
to communicate with your, I guess, your partner or your previous partner, or the mother or father of your
Of your
child.
child,
Right.
yes. Yeah.
So I will start off by saying there's a lot of information out now when it comes to children, because they're involved in sports, they're involved in school, medical,
Right.
hospital, stuff like that. Whose responsibility is it to communicate that information, or is it anyone's responsibility? Is it just a free for all?
Well, maybe let's start with the scenario,
Okay,
right? So, co parenting,
you co-parenting.
one parent has the child most often.
Okay,
The other parent is what? What are we going to say? Semi involved, all the way involved, that they just live with the other parent. Let's say partially involved.
okay,
Okay. And I don't know, let's say that the parent who has the child most of the time has provided the resources to the other parent to get school schedules. They added that parent's email to the school. I don't know if you'd call it a roster, like in an emergency or your kid missed school today.
Okay.
They get notified. They've provided all that information to include the other parent. Sports, I've provided the schedule of the season to that parent. Isn't that all that I'm responsible to do?
Not necessarily true, because
Okay.
if you have the child the majority of the time,
Mhm.
right? And let's say you set the child up for school. Let's say you register the child for school.
Yes.
In some cases, they only allow one parent as the primary and another
disagree.
parent
Primary,
as
yes. Okay.
the alternate. So they ain't got time to be communicating with the
No.
mama, the father, the grandmama, the whole nine. No.
Okay, from experience, the schools locally,
Okay.
they yes have a primary and a secondary, but everyone you provide on there does get notified.
But then when you go register the kid,
Mhm.
who sets that up though?
Whoever the parent said, it doesn't matter who sets it up. It is. I agree that it is that parent's responsibility to include the other parent, whether it's the required email, phone number, so that they get the same notifications.
Right.
Because I am not going to notify you
So-
on certain things, because you have that ability to get the same notifications that I'm getting.
So let's make it clear with the schooling, when you go register the child,
Yes.
right? It's your responsibility to add my information
Yes, I agree.
to the registration
Yes.
as a secondary
Totally agree.
means of communication.
Correct.
Okay. Well, let's say it gets a little more difficult when you don't have the option to add someone to it.
But again, I'm only going based off of experience, and the way that I feel society is now, there has to at least be two.
Well, I'm thinking the way the society is now, two people need to be communicating, and you need to communicate.
No.
The person that has the child, the majority of the time, needs to communicate with the other person on what's going on with the child,
Okay,
no
so
matter
maybe
if I
this is-
have the information
This
or
is the
not.
first chime in that I want you guys to respond. Letting you, like, if you have firsthand experience with schools, do the school programs or registrations allow more than one contact?
Do they allow
Let me
more than
know.
one contact? I don't know.
Again,
And then,
my experience, yes.
Do you think it's your responsibility, if they do allow more than one, to actually
Put their info.
put my info on there? Or do you tell me, hey, I registered a child for school, you go put your info
Well,
in?
it also, I think, depends on the relationship and the involvement of the other parent, because if the other parent isn't involved and they have nothing to do with that parent, maybe a call, hey, I'm registering my kid, do you want to be on this? Right?
So,
that might
but
be
that's
some of the
communication,
conversation
though.
too. Correct. But I think when we decided to do this podcast, my thought of it is the daily updates and this and that. That to me is what we were here for. Is that's not my responsibility. I'm not your calendar. I'm not your secretary.
Okay.
That was my perspective of us doing this. Yes, there are certain things that I'm required to give you, but I'm not here to give you daily updates minute by minute.
If the child is in your custody the majority of the time, I say that you pretty much are, though. Now, Jasmine, thank you for chiming in, Jasmine. She says that it really just depends on how involved the second parent is.
I agree.
Why?
What do you mean why?
Because it's not about us as in our relationship. It's about you informing me
Correct.
on what's going on.
But that parent that's not involved may not want to be notified. That's why I think that has to be considered.
I disagree.
If they're not really involved, why would you add them so that they're being notified?
Well, then you tell me. I should tell you. If I'm not involved in the child's life, I think I should tell you, hey, take me off of this because I don't want to be involved. But you should involve me anyway. It's about the child, the well-being of the child.
If they're already not involved, then I shouldn't assume. What if they're like, I don't want to be involved? So then that's when the conversation needs to be discussed.
Right, but at least you're communicating with me. And then after that, if I tell you I don't want to be involved, then you've done your job.
Correct, but you're saying after the fact that when I go register my kid, I'm going to add them right away and then have the conversation if they start getting notifications, and then you come back saying, I don't want those notifications. The conversation should happen before and say, I'm registering little Timmy. Do you want to be added so you get the same notifications I do?
I think you should involve me until I tell you that I don't want to be involved. Like Jasmine says that I guess the person that she's with don't check in on the child at all. But initially, I think it's her responsibility to add the individual onto the information. What he does with it, that's on him. Has nothing to do with her being a secretary or not. She's given him the opportunity to be a parent.
By me conversating and calling you to tell you this is what's going on, at that time is when you have the opportunity to say yes or no.
Okay. E-Ride says, nope, not your secretary.
Thank you.
No.
Thank you.
Yes. I think
I
that
agree.
if you have the child the majority of the time, it is your responsibility to inform the other parent, regardless on what's going on, unless he or she says that they do not want to be involved. It's your responsibility to let that person know what's going on or give them the tools. Because just because you have access to a cell phone or you have access to email, don't mean everyone does.
Again, it's communication up front. My job is up front to get the information because I am the parent who registered them from school
Okay.
or sports or whatever. Up front, I'm the one with that knowledge. But once I pass that knowledge on to you and you have the same access that I would have to get the updates,
Okay.
then
But when I did
my hands
when I
are
did
free after
research,
that.
what I did was I looked at the top 5, and I think on the top 5, when it comes to difficulties of co-parenting, is one person might be financially unable. So if
Okay.
I'm unable to have, like, let's say the internet to check emails, or I'm unable to have like a cell phone, isn't it your responsibility to find a way to communicate with me what's going on with the child?
It's different. I mean, that circumstance is a circumstance. It's a specific situation. So I can understand certain accommodations in that aspect. But we're talking about when both parents have access. So you're bringing it up if they don't have access. That
Okay.
wasn't what the
So
conversation.
we're talking equal opportunity.
opportunity.
We're talking equal
Yes.
opportunity. Megan Valdez says she tells Tonio everything that's going on with the kids. But Megan, I will ask you, and God forbid this would ever happen,
Mhm.
if you guys were to split up, do you think it's your responsibility to communicate just like you do now, everything that's going on with the children? If you have equal access to it, or do you think that is Tonio's responsibility to invest in his own way means of finding out what's going on with the kids, such as sports, this, that, and the other? That would be my question. Also,
Yeah, it's different, Megan. And like Ron said, God forbid, because you guys are like the best, perfect couple. But yeah, you guys aren't necessarily co-parenting because you guys are within the same household
right, you're
and
together.
married.
Mhm.
So yeah, think about it, if you weren't with him, what would your boundaries be?
Right.
I
And,
guess.
and does that depend on if you really get along with the individual or not? Or should it? Because it has nothing to do with your relationship with the other person. It should have to do with the well-being of the child.
Yes, I agree.
Get involved if you want to know what's going on. I would tell the other parent how to stay involved in all the ways I do. After that, it's on them. All right, I can agree with that. If you have everything that's going on, even though some things change, if I have the child the majority of the time, and I say, hey, there's a basketball game at 5 o'clock. However,
It
the
changed.
basketball game changed, it
Or
got
canceled.
canceled or whatever.
I agree.
I expect
But
you to
you're
reach
the one
out to
with
me.
that knowledge, so yes, it's your responsibility to communicate at that point because you're the only one with the knowledge. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so another point you had was about at what age, right?
Right. And at what age? Because now kids come out the womb with a cell phone.
Yeah.
Right. Now, every kid, no matter how old you are, has a cell phone. So at what age is it that it's the responsibility of just the parent to communicate with the child?
Right.
Well, two parents don't have to communicate with each other anymore. The child needs to communicate with the mother or the father, excuse me.
Well, I think you have firsthand knowledge in New Mexico, anyways, that the age where they do consider the child's opinion on certain things is what, 14?
14.
So
yes.
maybe that's a decent age where the kid at that time is communicating directly.
But these kids are grown before 14.
Yeah, nowadays.
You see what I'm
I know
saying?
my son had a phone starting at 10, but I was a single parent and he like walked to school and back and stuff. So I did have him with the cell phone pretty early just so that I was able to communicate.
Okay.
So let's see. We have a comment from Patrick Baird. It does depend if you have a good relationship with other parent, but it does depend how involved the other parent is and depends how much I communicate regarding daily affairs.
Right.
Yeah.
But should it depend on how involved the other parent is? And you guys can actually call in. The phone number is 505-528-4504 if you want to call in Again, that number is 505. Should be posted 505-528-4504. But yeah, it just depends. I think that if we had a good communication, I would communicate. What's up? What's up? Your opinion matters. So talk to us. Who am I talking to?
Hi, this is Crystal. I am just calling in
All right.
regarding co-parenting.
What's going on, Crystal? So the conversation is co-parenting, and do you think it's your responsibility to communicate as a parent to the other parent on the well-being and all the things that your child is involved in?
I think it depends. Again,
Okay.
if the other parent is involved, then I probably would communicate as much as I do with, say, my husband and my son's father, if he is involved as we are. If they're not, I probably am not going to make as much of an effort to communicate on daily affairs. But if it's a big thing, you probably should.
Okay, but my question to you would be, what do you consider involved?
Oh, that's a good question.
Like, what is involved?
I would say like does the other kid go with them every other weekend or every other week, or are we sharing time, or are they completely at my house? If they're completely at my house and maybe, I don't know, you spend some time with them or you try to call them, then I'm going to probably, try to make an effort to communicate, what's going on in the day-to-day activities. But if you're not involved, I'm probably going to just forget to communicate with you about day-to-day things.
So you're saying
because
it's
you're not involved.
necessarily because they're not involved, but because they're not involved, you just don't think of
You forget.
the info.
I forget to think of them, to add them to my needs to know, or
Yeah.
What?
So what do you feel about, and I think you as Ron said, about if something changes, do you think that is your responsibility?
And then I also think it's age dependent. So like if they're younger, like right how you were saying earlier, if they're younger, under the age of 13 and 14, where before they have the choice to decide, if they want to be involved in the other parent, then you might have to update them, because they can't maybe directly communicate with that child because they may not have a cell phone, because they're younger. So then you might have to actively communicate with them more, because they can't communicate with the child. But once a child gets like of a certain age and they do have a cell phone, then I feel like it's up to the parent to be communicating with the child regarding day-to-day things. And then if something big comes up, then me as a parent will contact you to let you know, A, B, and C.
Right.
I think with age 2 comes maturity, right? Because if you have a 10-year-old and that child normally does interact or communicate with the other parent, but they aren't very good at either remembering, like, oh, mom, I had a game on this day, but they changed it, or whatever, right? So I think also has to be considered if they're responsible and mature enough to communicate that information.
Right, because I that kids only give half the information when it comes to passing on information, period. So that could be a little difficult when it comes to communicating with the child. So the child has to be a little mature to pass on that information.
Right. Yes, I completely agree with that, because my son now is a freshman, and he started playing sports in high school. And the coaches, for example, told us that now they're, young adults. And so the coaches are going to communicate directly with your child, and there will be no communication between the coaches and the parents.
Oh.
And so it's up to the child to communicate to the parent. Right? They're kind of like the other parent.
But at that point, you're
if
not
there's
even
something
getting
important
the information
going on.
At that point, you're not even getting the information your son is. So it's his responsibility to get it to both you and the other parent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think it just really depends on the age. So like if they're younger, they don't have a cell phone, and you do have more access to, like, say their school stuff, or when parent teacher conferences are. And I actually will admit that I was probably bad at doing that because of the involvement of the other parents. That, say, when a parent teacher conference was going to come up, or I would forget to contact the other parent because of their lack of involvement. And then they also, like Angela was saying, would receive those emails and phone calls and things as same as I did, but yet it was my fault that I didn't contact them regarding the parent teacher conference when they got the same email as I did.
Now, I would agree with you on that. I don't think that's right. If they receive the same email, you don't necessarily have to reach out to them. But if they tell your son or your daughter that a parent teacher conference is Friday and they don't communicate with you guys through email, I would expect you to reach out to the father to say, hey, did the son tell you that there's a parent teacher conference on Friday at 10 o'clock? Are you going or not?
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I will say I have been guilty of that. And then one also recent thing that had come up was an active shooter drill where there was like police and, helicopters, and I didn't contact his father because I didn't think of it, And so that was one instance where maybe I should have contacted his father and didn't think of it because of the involvement.
Now, in that case, did the father contact you? So there are some
instances, like in an emergency, where you should contact the other parent,
Did he contact you, though, after he found out about the active shooter incident?
Yes, he contacted me because he had saw it on the news, and he was wondering, like, why he didn't get contacted about which I'm saying he gets the emails and stuff, so I'm not sure if he got an email. I'm not sure, but he didn't hear about it till he saw the news, so he was wondering why he didn't get contacted.
Oh yeah, because maybe he's just like me, because I never check my emails. My emails are backed up, and I'll tell you what, I got thousands of emails I don't check.
That's true.
Yeah,
so maybe he did get an email.
So it could be that,
Yeah.
But I do take responsibility that maybe I should have contacted him regarding that.
Yeah, something that is involved with life or death, definitely. If your child may be in harm's way and it's in question if your child was affected in any type of way, medical, schooling type stuff needs to be relayed regardless.
I do agree with that, and I should have done a better job at that. So I do take full accountability for that one.
Good job.
Okay, all right.
Thank you so much for calling in.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for calling in, and I hope you have a wonderful night.
Good day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all too. Bye.
We thank that young lady for calling in. Like we were saying, responsibility-wise, on whose responsibility is it to inform the other parent on what's actually going on? In some instances, I do think that it is the person that has the child the majority of the time to communicate with the other parent, regardless on what the situation is, and give that parent the opportunity to either be involved or not. I know it seems a little crazy, but there was a case that I looked at recently where the parent that had the majority of the time, they went up in a court case and they were looking at getting custody. The father that wasn't so involved was looking at getting custody. I don't know if it was full custody or part-time custody or whatever, 50-50. And they asked the parent, did she reach out to the father to give them all the information that he needed to be a good parent? And she said no. And then the judge awarded the father custody of the kid because it was her responsibility to inform the father on what's going on, because you never know what the father's circumstances are.
I disagree.
Like I said, that's just how it is. Sometimes
I disagree only if, like I said, if you set it up correctly up front and they have the same access and ability that you do, then that's when I say, no, I'm not gonna keep giving you daily updates, because just like the way I find out is the way you have the ability to find out.
And I'm not saying daily updates. I'm just saying it's your responsibility. And should you inform the parent that is around, but not 100% involved?
Well, what's the what do you mean?
The difference is they are kind of in communication with the child. They're around, but when it comes to going to school or their report card or their sports, they're not really involved in that. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Should you still inform that parent on what the activities are, where they're going to be, the times, and whatnot?
I can only speak from experience, and my issue was a little different because my son's father lived out of state. So, it's not like he could come to his games or things like that. What was funny though is I did always include him in, the school stuff. Like he got the same email. I added his email and phone number for registration.
Hmm.
So he got the same access as I did. And funny story is when my son started getting older and him and I were kind of butting heads because my expectations were not his expectations on what he was required to do, right? And so that little brat had the nerve to take me off of his registration stuff. So I stopped getting notifications.
notifications.
But because he took me off, his dad started getting all the notifications, which at that time he was like missing a lot of school. And so his dad contacted me like, why is my son, missing like 4 days this week of school? So it kind of like, what is it? Kicked him in the butt.
Yeah, backfired on him or
backfired on
whatever.
him. But yeah, I still tried to give him the same information that I had the resources
Right.
to a point.
And I think when I went through the co-parenting thing, we actually communicated with each other. Like, this is what's going on. Plus, she was a little older, so we actually communicated with her, and she let us know
Each
exactly.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
each parent know exactly what's going on, and we decided from there how involved we were going to be.
But I feel like your daughter was a little more mature at that age, whereas like my nephew,
Mm.
he's just not as communicative, right? So your daughter was probably better at letting you guys know what the other said or communication from her school or her sports, because I believe she was in volleyball and stuff, right?
And band and
Right.
everything,
So
choir, and
I think that's part of that maturity, because I feel like my nephew, I just don't know if, even if his intent is to communicate, I don't think he listens well enough to get all the appropriate information.
because you don't
in
want
order
it. You
to
don't need to get all the
communicate.
information. You just need to tell half the story, and then that's when the parents get involved and be like, "What? Well, you got to do it when?" And 9 times out of 10, it's at that moment.
Yeah, but that's another issue that can arise, is because if the parents are already kind of battling,
Hmm.
and then there's missing information, the parent who's maybe not involved may then blame the other parent.
But that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be a blame game when it comes to the
Well,
child.
but
The
that's
well-being of the
reality,
child
though.
is what's important.
Yeah.
I should be able to talk to you. I don't have to hold a serious conversation with you. I don't have to ask you how your day was going. I just need to say, hey, such and such has a basketball game at 5 o'clock at Volcano Vista, or on Friday at 10:30 we have a parent-teacher conference. Either you communicate with the school and you have your own conference with them, or show up at 10:30.
Only if he does not have the same, or they don't have the same notification. I'm telling you, because did anyone respond about their knowledge of the school system, and if there was more than one like contact that they could add?
No, but I did have a conversation earlier with a coworker, Mr.
Mhm.
Erod, and he did say you can add more than one
Right.
person as far as getting the notifications.
Right.
So, but like I said, it's up to the person that either registers the child or the other person to reach out to the school to say, add me as a person on the contact list.
But at what point, like I said, if you have the schedule, I'm sorry, but we're we're co-parenting for a reason. So the less communication I have to have with you, the better. Like,
But
at
not,
what point is it your responsibility as a parent
right.
to take ownership of the things that you know what I mean? Like,
But
if you know that I signed our kid up for school, or I mean for sports, and you had that knowledge, and then you're like, you know what, the season should have started. Let me contact them
Okay.
to say, where's the schedule, where's this, instead of being like, well, you never sent me. Like,
Well,
some of it is,
but I know if you have the child, you have the schedule.
I
So why
hear
don't you
but
just
at
shoot the
some
schedule to
point,
me
just
real
like
quick?
you're making it my responsibility, at what point is it your responsibility to say, hey, I know little JoJo started basketball. Can I get the schedule? You didn't provide it to me.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, at what point do you take ownership of your involvement, not just rely on me?
Right. Well, it is the point and where you are involved in the child's life. Period. You need to reach out to see what information that you can get, no matter if the other person has it or not. And we're communicating right now and holding this podcast as if the two parents don't really get along. But there's a lot
Yeah.
of people that co-parent that actually do get along with each other, that communicate well. You see what I'm saying?
But I think, like, Crystal gave a good example. I think in general, her and her son's father, they get along decently well. So there's not really like beef there, but it's just habit that at one point or another you weren't as involved, and so I didn't have to have that communication. So now it's like,
so now you're
habit.
gonna forget to
And
tell me some things.
Right. It's just habit. Not to say that it's right, but I could see it happening.
Right. I can see that
even
too.
if it wasn't intentional.
I can see that too.
Yeah.
Well, the bottom line to this conversation is communication. That is the
Yeah.
bottom line to this this conversation.
But also to prioritizing your child.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Even if you don't care for your ex or whatever, does your kid want that parent
Yeah.
there, you know, at the games or involved in school or whatever?
And that might be a different podcast. That might be because you have a lot of kids that don't really get along with one or the other parent,
true.
and we as parents tend to try to force visitation or force communication with the other parent. So
Yeah.
that might be a different conversation.
Yeah.
But in this conversation, we're talking about communication and responsibilities of co-parenting. It can be very difficult nowadays, or it can be really easy because the child, like I said, once they drop out of the womb, they got a cell phone. So the communication should always be there. The deal is, it's up to you as parents to, like Angela said, prioritize the child. Whatever you have that is the difference between you and the person that you chose to have a child with, you got to hash that out and do not have false or mixed communication with the person that wants the information.
Yeah.
Put it out there. If you have information that the other person needs to know, let them know. Either give it to them or let them know where they can find or sign
Yes.
up for
The
the
same
information.
notifications, yeah.
Yes. If not, you're being selfish and you can fall into a petty category, because that blame game is going to be serious if one person is so-called involved and the other one is not, due to false or inaccurate information.
True.
All right.
Yeah, I agree.
So for those that have chimed in, I really appreciate you for
Thank
chiming
you.
in. For those that have called in, like Crystal, I really appreciate you calling in. That is our podcast for today. I hope everyone is in good spirits. Weekend is coming up pretty soon, so you guys make sure you take care of yourself. I see a lot of bad weather going around. There was snow in California, tornadoes in Texas. So make sure that you are safe as we approach the weekend.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us. Stay tuned for our next episode. I don't know what it is yet, but we will post it pretty soon. But thank you guys for all of your support.